All right, I'm going to start off. Kimberly,
Yes.
I know from your videos and things that I've watched and I've seen you, you talk a lot about mentoring. And at Tonneson, mentoring and our mentoring programs have always been something that we think about. And I'd like to get your advice on how to make them better, maybe some new ideas, and just something that we could think about.
From a mentoring perspective, what I've seen is the artificial someone else outside those two parties. If someone else is artificially setting them up, they're not going to last. They're just not. It's probably better to have a speed mentoring, and I've seen those, where mentors go in a room and the people who are looking to be mentored are together, and you find the right fit. And sometimes it's just the chemistry. You have things in common. They understand where you're going. It's a candid relationship. It needs to be like Vegas rules. What happens in that relationship needs to stay in that relationship unless the mentee gives permission for it to maybe be explored with their manager or back to HR. But I think that it'll be more authentic and it will last a lot longer, because I think we've all been through the HR programs where we assign you to someone and just for whatever reason it does not work, because the most authentic relationships would be people who kind of like each other and that have something in common. So much so that if I were free for lunch, that I could just almost email you and say, hey, are you doing anything? You want to come over? Almost like that. Now, is there a place for, depending on how high up the person is, that it's not going to be that casual? Absolutely true. But I think if you're asking for the most productive relationships, it's what I described.
Great, thank you.
You guys both spoke about, and Kimberly, we see you in a video going to the elementary schools, and Zach and Carrie spoke about the programs you have at Haverhill High School and things like that. What's the hook? You talked about when you were in elementary school, you managed the money. When I talk to my kids, oh, what do you do, Dad? Oh, I'm an accountant. What? They associated tax season, you know what I mean? That's the association. But what's the hook now? Like, what do you guys do in high schools? And Kimberly, like when you're in those elementary schools now, is it still the same as when you were in elementary school?
So I'll let you guys go.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. So I would say one thing that we find is how many people in the room had a parent, aunt, uncle, friend who was a CPA before you were? By a show of hands. Yeah, so one thing that we find is that what really gets students engaged is whether they have a personal relationship with somebody who is a CPA. And for those that don't, we try to be that personal relationship for them to get them exposed to the profession, to find out about the benefits that they have. And I won't lie, I think for high school students, we put up a chart with salaries and they're all like, all right, that profession's for me, I'm in.
Sign up.
Yeah, just I talked to our academic team that goes out to the schools and was asking them, what is the hook? And they were saying that, a lot of where maybe more seasoned professionals are nervous about this upcoming technology, and there's so many changes happening. That's what's attracting these young students to the profession, is that, okay, I'm a digital native, so that doesn't make me nervous that technology is going to be a huge piece of this. So being able to combine like a really stable job that makes a lot of money and does well with these technology skills and all the new and up and coming trends is really attractive to them.
And I would add, and this is probably the most uncomfortable part of where we're going, because that emotional intelligence piece, we're going to have to almost, if introverts, and I don't know if that's true, but if people say introverts are attracted to our profession, now we're asking them to go and sell the profession. And I know sales is sometimes used like used car salesman, but in this context, I mean inspire someone to want to be like you. So I can tell you, because I'm on the STEM side, because I have a view into what they're doing. My kids went to an engineering camp and they were making perfume. And my son was in a robotics camp where they built a robot that was dunking a basketball. And they were making solar panels. They look fun, they look hip, the people were happy. We always don't look happy when we show up. And so it's almost looking like you'd rather be at the dentist than showing up to talk about how amazing the profession is. And so we have to talk about options. And so the first year where I got my rear kicked by the veterinarians bringing in dogs, the guys who do construction with the construction truck outside, the musician bringing in a trumpet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need props. Because this, in today's environment, isn't gonna work. I got Monopoly money. And I got piggy banks from Feed the Pig. And I talked about the options in our profession. We have this perception that if you talk to anybody, they think we do taxes. Everybody does taxes. They do not realize that we're in every industry and we are in every segment in the capital markets across the world. And so today, if I were going into a school environment, I would say Steph Curry needs he needs a CPA. I'd say Cardi B needs a CPA. I'd say Future needs a CPA. Drake needs a CPA. We have to be more current and hip because it appears that there's a class system between people who want to be CPAs and people who are not. And I don't know if we're positioning the choices and options and opportunities that you could really start here and go places, and that you could be a CEO of an organization, and that foundationally the knowledge and skill sets that you get from being a CPA make you more competitive and really, I would say, differentiated than any other candidate. But we're not conveying that because we'll go in and we'll say, hi, I'm Kimberly, and I'm a CPA. I mean, it just does not make you feel like you want to do it. So we're going to have to change our approach to reach the young people, because the technology people, they're going in with, and I told my son this, I was like, you're looking at Mark Zuckerberg, but he probably has 500 of those shirts, and those are not Hanes. He just is making it look like they're Hanes shirts. So.
Excellent.
I think this question kind of leads into what you're talking about and inspiring people to get into the profession. At Tonneson, we've been really big on the work-life balance. But listening to you speak, all of you speak, or all of us, I think it's a challenge. How do you and have you been able to balance it all so that you are, and how do we relay that? Because I think a lot of young people, it's a scary profession to get in because historically it's been a lot of hours, and we're trying to change that. And I just would like to get all your perspectives on that balance and how to achieve that.
As a non-CPA, we don't work nearly as many hours as all of you, but I've been at the Society for 16 years, and I have to say the tremendous changes and growth that I've seen in the accounting profession with work-life balance is amazing, and I do think that's where our industry surpasses many others. I'm so impressed with the programs that I see nationally and locally, and I think while there are a lot of hours, I think the profession really lends itself well to having that flexibility. So what we've heard just from talking with other firms is that if you can build a team you trust, then flexibility can happen. And that's the key to it, is just have the trust there, and then people can work from home, work remotely, work when they need to get it done and get the job done. And I think that's something that also should be brought when we're going out to students, is talking about this is a great career path for people thinking of having a family. There are a lot of options to flex your time, work a lot of tax season hours, but then pull back the rest of the year. So I think there needs to be a level of transparency too of just what your options are.
And I would definitely say I was just at a women's conference yesterday before I got here. And it's interesting because that I was talking about my sons. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. And when they were younger, I remember running through the airport with my Medela, pumping style. So I was a lactating mom, and look that up, guys, if you don't know what that means. And I did it. So for the first son, I did it for 13 months and a half, and the second son for 15 months. And so when people say, well, Kimberly, how did you do it? Well, guess what? When I went on the road, I got a refrigerator ordered to the room. I mean, I was packing ice. I mean, if you really want to do it, you will make it happen. If you don't, you will make an excuse. Do not let other people define who you are and what you are. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I'm not that person. And as a matter of fact, I went through a lot of guilt over not wanting to be the stay-at-home mom, because society puts so much pressure on women to define us as, we're bad moms if you want to work, if you're not greeting the school bus, if you don't have all the food groups. And I'm like, wait a minute. I remember people saying when they were making their baby food from scratch, and I was like, what is going on with Gerber? Because it's working pretty good. So I say all that to say, you can do it. If I did it, you can do it. And I did it when TSA wasn't that friendly. And so you have to think, how do you make it work? I was on stage, I remember at the council meeting when I was the chair, and I needed to be with my son for the recital, like a recital 2 days later. I drove 2.5 miles one way to spend 20 minutes listening to him play the trombone to drive 2.5 hours back. The only thing I didn't do, because I think I'd rather stick myself in the eye, was get on the bus, because I got on the bus the first year. And after I learned my lesson with the first son, I was like, oh, I'm never doing that again. So I drove myself, but I was there. So I say that to say, define it and do it how you can do it. It's okay if you've got dust bunnies behind the door. And goodness knows there is real chicken in those chicken nuggets. Your kids will survive. And I just think we have to be perfectionists, and then we think, oh my gosh, we need to be there for every single event. Your kids don't even want us to be there for every single event. And so I think we have to own that we're multidimensional, and that there are multiple ways of doing things, and that you can figure it out, and that you have a technology firm, employee-empowered firm that is willing to say, okay, if you need to take your kid to the doctor, get back online after you get home or after you come from a soccer game and get your work done. And as long as you get it done, it sounds like the results will be what counts. And I think that's where we are in today's environment. But the first thing we have to do is get out of our own heads on what we're expected to do.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is we were just at a meeting with firm administrators and operations folks, and I think one of the things that really it was a big conversation, but one thing that really resonated was that I think firms, those that are incredibly flexible to those that are not at all, are just doing a better job at kind of managing people's expectations, especially for those that are new to the profession, to say, you're not going to have everything at once, and you're not going to have the most flexible day when you necessarily need it, but there are going to be long weeks and weekends and, at different points in the year, but, we hope to give that back at different points throughout the year. So I think really just, especially for the younger generation, just managing expectations that the balance and work-life balance is pretty key.
Looking ahead into 2019, as Kimberly and Zach, primarily on this one, what are the hot button items, like in government affairs and advocacy? What are you guys seeing out there?
You want to go first or me?
Sure. Well, you go ahead as the
Okay,
national
I'll go.
perspective. I'll just piggyback on whatever you say.
Good for you. Yeah. So we integrated, I don't know if you guys know, but I'm the immediate past chair of AICPA. I'm the immediate past chair of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. And now the overarching group has 670,000 in 184 countries. That's very important for us from an advocacy perspective, because people take your calls when you have a voice. That's that loud, large, and that is that visible. And because we are the fundamental pillars of the capital markets, everyone is impacted when we are not involved, because then you'll start to see mandatory firm rotation, you start to see tax on services. When people can't make up their budgets, you'll start seeing them look through and say, who can we tap? And next thing you know, we'll be tied up in the legislation. You'll start to see in some instances where they were saying, well, why do we need licenses at all? Why can't the market, if we're free market, why can't the market just decide, if you don't like that doctor, why have them? We really right now are in different states talking to the advocacy teams about people who are anti-license. And so we're keeping our eyes on that ball, and we're giving the ammunition and talking points to the advocacy teams. We're watching the global marketplaces, because what we don't want is a patchwork environment that firms, especially small firms and medium-sized firms, that it's difficult for you because you don't have a national office. And so everywhere you go, you'd almost have to have a team that understands the rules and regulations of every single state. And then if you're going abroad because there are supply chain opportunities or opportunities to partner, that you're also having to have a separate team. We want the business environment to thrive and be easier to operate in, and we know our legislators will get good ideas, and we want to make sure that they understand the ramifications and the impact to our profession and to our members when they do things that are anti-business. And so we have a whole team in Washington on K Street. We're at the Willard, but everyone's on K Street, so I said K Street. And we are constantly watching bills because there's language that'll be on the third page of the 3,000th page of Section 4 that I would have never have caught because I need a Cliff Notes version. I'm just going to be honest. In this advocacy space, the people who do that work are worth their weight in gold, because there are bills that will be about red light traffic cameras, and on page 4 at the bottom of the second paragraph, it'll say something like, we're going to tax all CPAs another 30%. I would have totally missed that. But they catch it and they bring it forward, and I can tell you they're watching what's happening in a tax environment. We're getting questions on tax reform. I think that's an opportunity for us. It also is uncomfortable for the people who knew the 30 years of tax information, because now you're level set back to zero in a way. But we have people on these committees that will forget in a day more than we would ever know. And if you have that kind of knowledge and technical depth, we would encourage you to get on those committees. But in every single area, especially in healthcare as well, we're constantly trying to be aware of things that would make your environments living nightmares.
Yeah, I would just add, we're very fortunate in Massachusetts to not have some of the anti-regulatory activity that's happening in other states, but it really is kind of alarming to see what coalitions are forming around stripping kind of the licensing requirements away from professions. So something that we're definitely keeping an eye on, especially if there is any activity in our New England counterparts, New England states, it'll be of interest to us for sure. As I kind of mentioned in the presentation, we have a couple more proactive initiatives. One thing that we'll be working on this year is to update the statutes that govern the accountancy profession. It sounds wildly boring, I understand, but when you think about how the way that individual mobility works is that all states, through their state societies and firm support, have adopted mirror legislation to ensure that CPAs can operate across state lines with no additional fee or notice. Getting those statutes updated to reflect the most recent version is really critical to making sure that you all can operate wherever you need to. So that's a big initiative for us this year. And then we'll be, trying to help the legislature get their hands around tax reform, looking for guidance from the DOR, the IRS, and that sort of thing. So.
I
Floor is
think
yours.
we have a question.
Well, actually, I just wanted to kind of open up all the questions to the floor to see if anyone out here has a question. So please raise your hand.
The second question, because the first one is always hard again.
Yeah. Christine Howard, table 10.
Sure. You don't run, please. Don't
Yeah.
please. You don't run.
Kimberly, what's one thing you could tell a pregnant lady?
Don't run. She's getting gray in my hair. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about unconscious bias? And it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? So how do you get people comfortable to have that uncomfortable conversation?
Well, one of the things I do is I kind of joke about it, and I bring it to their attention in a joking kind of way. I can tell you that I think people choose to be offended. I create safe zones for people to have dialogue with me, and it's really heartening for me to work with guys who seek me to go to dinner with them, that would actually say, hey, KET, we're going out, do you want to go with us? Because when you're on your off time, some people would just do room service and they prefer it. Because if you have to be on all night and day, And if someone uses some colorful language and you're going to call a CNN press conference about it, they're not going to call you for the dinner. And so I have appreciated working with guys who, I don't know if they see me as one of the guys, but they definitely would not shy away from calling me. And that's because I give them a safe environment that we can be ourselves. You can ask me the question. I'll let you know if there's a line that you shouldn't cross. But I do believe that we have let, in some instances, political correctness run amok, and it scares us. And because it scares us, I think some of what we see is more cronyism than I would say sexism or racism. And I say that because it's easier to be around people who are like you. Because then if you scratch, let's say, I don't know, then they're not clutching their pearls and horrified or that you said a bad word. I think that we have to be a little more open. And when they asked me about what did I want to be called, they said, are you black or are you African American? And I was like, yes. But by virtue of the fact that, and it was Barry Melanson that asked me, by virtue of the fact that he could even ask me, told me he felt comfortable. Because when I meet people and they're like, oh my God, Afro, black, colored, I'm scared, I don't know what to say, I don't say anything, I'm gonna ignore that she's black. You can't ignore it. You have to acknowledge and appreciate the differences that we all have. And I would also say that in instances where you're meeting people and you're like, oh, she would never be the chair, or I'm looking at what I see on television as the standard. People, this is the stereotype, the unconscious bias. People will meet me, and instead of changing their perception about black people, they would just say Kimberly's different. Because their unconscious bias will not allow them to say in their minds, maybe they're wrong. Unconscious bias says, I'm a woman of childbearing age, and if I'm her manager, am I taking her off the partner track in my mind because I'm thinking she's gonna get pregnant, have a baby, and leave? We all have them. It's something that we all think and do, but you gotta fight through it. And the people who are most like us get a longer runway. When people are different from us, as soon as they make a mistake, you went from down here to here. You're like almost ready to fire the person. But the person who went to school, your school, who lives in your community, that goes to your religious institutions, they probably do 10 things wrong and you give them chance after chance after chance. And that's where we see the unconscious bias showing up, especially when you have people who have kids who don't versus those that don't. So you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to understand if it's a woman, if you're being dismissive of her ideas, and then if Jack says it, it's, oh my gosh, it's like the gospel because Jack said it, but she said it 3 times ago. Her credibility isn't, and all the nights and hours she stays up is not being recognized, but the dude who wings it and is likable is now a partner. Yeah, we see it all the time. And so the key is to identify those behaviors, in a nice way call it out, because sometimes people don't realize they're even doing it, and then be willing to have an ongoing conversation about what are we really doing about this unconscious bias. And let's not shy away from things that I believe will make us all better.
We have a question from Lynn.
Hi. So I was just trying to get your insights on one of the slides that you have over there previously. You said 75% of the S&P 500 company will disappear, like in 8 years by 2027.
Mm-hmm. 25.
That's 2027. That's not too far away.
No.
They don't just disappear and disappear, right? Like disappear.
Well, it's because, well, it'll be like Sears. Because let's face it, Sears was complacent. You can't be everything to everybody. We saw Sears leaving. I saw Barnes and Nobles and Borders. We saw them exiting. GE, which I'm like personally horrified. I've never worked at GE. But to think that GE was such a market giant, and now GE is making all these structural changes because they've lost their way, it's because the S&P is just a list of maybe the top Fortune 500. These companies are dropping in market cap and relevance. And I don't know if any of you know this, but probably about 15 or maybe 20 years ago, Apple was on its last legs. Apple was going out of business. I think it was a combination of, if I recall correctly, Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and some other people that gave Steve Jobs money to help Apple get on its feet, and now they have $1 trillion market cap. And so I say that to say we shouldn't be complacent, and we have to be careful about the competitors that are in our environments that are operating as friends, but are really frenemies. Because the people who are doing investments, the people who are doing estate planning, they're all well positioned to be the trusted advisor for your client and give away taxes and services for no cost. And so we can't rest on their laurels. And I think it is absolutely true that none of these companies, Facebook wasn't here. I mean, Facebook came around in maybe 2006, 2005. I mean, the iPod, the iPad, that changed the whole marketplace. We have YouTube with Google, and now we have the Android phone in 2006, 2007. That's in our lifetimes. That's only in the last 11 to 12 years. Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26 billion. Now, we know there was not $26 billion on LinkedIn's books, but the market value that Microsoft was going to get from LinkedIn is why they did it. LinkedIn disintermediated recruiters. Travelocity disintermediated travel agents. Intuit disintermediated people who did taxes. So when you think about all of the places that were, gone, and they're not here, and our kids will never even know they were there at all because they'll just go out of existence unless they're in the Smithsonian, which is closed this week, or for 34 days or whatever. So I just think that we have to say, especially as a firm that is so inspired, what else are you personally going to do? Because it sounds like the ball is in your court. It sounds like when I hear an employee-empowered firm, it sounds like you're all stakeholders and you're all accountable. And so we should take to heart, what does that mean? CPA firms are not on the S&P, but I don't think a lot of them will be here either if they're not adjusting to the environment that we're in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have one question that's come in through SurveyMonkey, and sorry, I have to take my glasses off.
Oh, I do that too.
Okay, so Kimberly, thank you for your insight. Throughout your career, did you encounter those who may have acted as roadblocks? If yes, how did you get around them, or how did you include them in your vision?
It's interesting because I've always had great managers, believe it or not, and they were Caucasian men. Like, I have had the best managers ever. And I remember, and this happened when I was at Oracle, I was in an industry, remember I told you I got it at 3 million. But what happened when I started growing it and getting it to 10 million, 15 million? All of a sudden, there were people coming out of the woodwork. Now, no one wanted to touch it before, but then they started seeing market opportunity. Now, all of a sudden, it's hot and it's popular and everyone wants to be involved. And someone had this great idea to separate my vertical. And they said, oh, it's too big. Let's separate the vertical. And I remember getting to Las Vegas. And my manager at the time, who was an active CPA, worked at Accenture in his career, he said, I told him what happened, and I was so angry that I could barely even speak. And he said, you know what, Kimberly? No good could come of you having a conversation with them. Get back on the plane and come home. Now, I had just spent, I can't even tell you how much money. My hotel room was there. He said, come back, don't have a conversation. I trusted him, and I went back, did not have a conversation, and 2 days later, they gave up the idea. But if they had actually spoken to me, I would not probably be at Oracle now, because that's how upset I was over them doing that, because I did not understand, and he explained it to me. Everyone wants to be part of a winning solution. I mean, you did the grunt work to get it to grow. Now everyone wants to be in the group picture. And I understand that. And so I can tell you that more than anything else, where I think people do with me or have done, is dismissiveness and underestimating my capability. Because I'm a black female. They see what's on television. They watch the rap artists. They see, if they're only watching one station, let's be honest, what that station is. If we're looking at that one station, then they have a view of minorities that is not necessarily favorable or that's going to show in a good light. So they bring that perception to me, and then I end up being better than they thought. And God knows that there's no way to be worse. And I think that then they have to adjust what they're thinking because they underestimate what I've done and what I can do. And I can tell you, I mean, even as the chairman, I've been places that when I started speaking, I could see people flipping through the program to my resume to basically figure out, where does she come from? Did we parachute her in? I know we went diversity, but where did we get her from? And then they realized that I was the chair of the Maryland Society of CPAs, that I've been working on every committee in our profession since I passed the exam in 1999. And I just think that we have to think about disappointments, think about how people perceive us, understand that there's going to be things that you can't change, and understand that just by being who you are, every interaction will help give them a new perspective on what you do.
Does anyone else have a question? Don't be shy. I'm like the shyest person here, so.
Someone has a question.
And if not, Amy and Kevin have
I
questions.
do have one.
Go for it.
Just to kind of circle back, I appreciate you talking about the CPA exam because I think a lot of young people, are, it's that they want to pass it, they want to get there. It's, I'm always trying to encourage because it can be very discouraging. And I think people, a lot of these folks, they don't give themselves a break. So if you could all just kind of speak to it and maybe just give a little bit of advice and hope and encouragement, because I think we all need that sometimes.
Yeah, I think as a society and what we hear from a lot of firms and other members is that just take it as soon as you can while you're still in study mode and school mode. I know it's hard because you're working a lot of hours and you're already really busy and overwhelmed maybe with being in your first job, but everyone I know that's taken it early and gotten it over with has never regretted that and said it was a lot easier when you're in that mindset. And I think take advantage of the resources that are out there, whether it's through your firm, through your state society. There are options, resources, and study groups. So get involved with those because it certainly will help.
I have enjoyed being a CPA, and I think it's buffered a little bit of the isms that I would experience. And I add age, because for whatever reason, if you notice, my hair was dark on the video and now it's lighter. I changed it to be darker in this room and on the video because I wanted to look older. Now I know you're like, Kimberly, what in the world are you talking about? But for the people who are looking very young, you know that sometimes it's hard for people to take you seriously because you look younger than whatever they perceive. And I remember one of the members in particular saying, oh, when I was your age, and I was thinking, dude, because dude is my favorite word. How old do you think I am? Because I'm thinking he was looking great, because I'm thinking if he said when I was your age that he had to be 60, and he was like, I'm 48, and I was like, well, I'm 46, you're not the boss of me. So, I say that to say, but being a CPA from an age perspective, really equalizes it. Because, and when I tell people I failed the test, I didn't get the Baltimore test, I didn't get the female test, I didn't get the black test, I got the test and passed it. And I think it is an equalizer of our credibility, it's a statement of achievement. I think it is a lot of hard work, but I think that anything that's worth having is going to be hard work, because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. The premium and differentiation and why you would be better selected for a role than someone else is tied into the competencies, perseverance, and persistence of passing that exam. It is only but one milestone in an unlimited path of opportunities. And I think we just need to put our heads down and do it. Successful people do what other people are not willing to do. And it is the difference between those who will be successful, and unfortunately, the path to good intentions is paved with a lot of failures. So we need to, the path to failure is paved with a lot of good intentions, so we need to pass it. And I can tell you, I studied 40 hours a week. And you may not have to do that because I'm studying for the whole exam. And I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't try to party. My husband would untie my shoelaces. I did a review course, and I did online problems. I must have done each section about 3,000 times. I wanted to pass the exam more than I wanted to breathe. And if you are not willing to put that level of effort and work in, it doesn't bode well for your career path in the future, because as soon as you hit a bump in the road, you can't say, I changed my mind, I don't want to do it. You can't, you were never serious about accounting if you said, oh, I was going to major, I was going to be a CPA, and then I just decided I'm going into whatever field. And you know people who have done that. They were not serious about being a CPA, because there are a whole lot of people that you've met already, and you've met me, that you should be thinking, if they're CPAs, then I know I can do it. And that's exactly what you should be thinking. I don't care if it takes you 100 times. No one ever asks you what you got, although we all remember, like a Vietnam flashback, what we got on the test, and we remember where we were when we passed or failed. Yeah. However, I have never regretted it in my career, and I can tell you that coupled with technology, it has made me a unicorn in some places, because people don't understand how you do technology and be a CPA. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you that you will be able to build a phenomenal, amazing career, and you need to just get your mind set that you're going to pass the exam, know that you can do it, you're brilliant, you're smart, you're capable. I don't care if you fail it the first time, I don't care if you fail it 2. Most of the people you know have failed it a whole bunch of times. They just conveniently forgot. So don't let it get you down. And I've done videos for people. I've done YouTubes, probably if I can find it, to say you can do it. So if you need me to be the cheerleader and put it on your phone and say you can do it, then I'm happy to do it, because it is an amazing career path.
It is.
It is.
Well, I think that about takes us our time up. So thank
does.
you all
Thank you
very
all.
much.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you.